How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another video on the React extend as a way to look at this particular course that will help us to write production grade React applications. So this course is taught by Brian Holt, a software engineer that has previously worked at Microsoft, Reddit, Netflix, Snowflake, this data lake software as a service. Okay, and currently he is the VP of product at SQLite Cloud. So he has he is the host of this course. Again, this is something from Frontend Master. The entire goal of today's video sorry about that. The entire goal of today's video is look at the tailwind Typescript. Sorry, why is that? Well, because this course is, or the goal of this course is to help us to write this production ready React applications. It's gonna show us techniques and tools to do that. Techniques or advanced techniques like code splitting, server-side rendering, transitions, as well as unit testing, and tools like Typescript, Tailwind, as well as Redux. Okay, so this is the goal of this course, and the goal of this series of videos is to improve my communication skills, take note from those courses, from those videos, as a way to now I can help clients when they have React web applications and solve their problems much more faster. And very, very important, to make things easy for them, especially when you have to explain what you have done to non-tech business people or clients. So right now what I'm gonna do is to make a quick recap of what I have learned so far in terms of hooks, tailwinds, and advanced React performance, as well as low priority re-rendering, and finally jump straight forward to Typescript, which is what we care about this video. So hooks in depth is to look at this advanced use case that Facebook actually face, and they create that to solve their particular business use cases that perhaps some companies like you're gonna work with, they're not need to actually make use of this. Some of them they do. So the TLDR of this is you have something called like use ref, use reducer, callback, and memo, the use ID, as well as use layout. And then we look at tailwinds that allow us to write CSS code in a much more maintainable and scalable way, because according to their website, and this is something true, it's way much more easy to maintain HTML elements than large CSS code bases. So we went through that to understand is what is the difference between tailwinds and things like Bootstrap and material UI, material design, as well as what is the anatomy of the tailwind, the compiler, the transpiler here for CSS, as well as the auto prefixer, how you can start using tailwinds, how you can extend the functionality of Tailwind with forms, with other plugins, how you can also enhance existing functionality in Tailwinds with plugins or your own custom CSS, but using Tailwinds as a way to stay in the Tailwinds world. Okay, remember that shifting content is something that's going to kill your productivity. So this is something to consider, especially as you move on in your journey. And then we look at layouts, how easy it is to create layouts with Tailwinds, especially for mobile development, tablet, desktop. It make it easy to maintain, debug, as well as uh, enhance or scale your applications. And then we look at this advanced React performance. You have code splitting, server-side rendering. The first focus is on how you can make things to load faster initially by loading only the necessary code to teach your app to set up things that can show something to the user while loading things in the background. Okay, that's why you should have is a code budget for doing that. For example, to have a threshold to stay under or a performance timing you want to hit. Okay, the way how you can do that is by using lazy function from React. This will generate is a chunk of or a JavaScript code uh, that the way how the browser, or in this case the application, know which code needs to fetch or catch is going to rely on service worker. So which is this feature, browser features, that sits between the application and your API, or the app requests in your API, that allows to set things like push notifications. It makes our applications work offline, as well as other features. So again, this is not a service worker course. It's important to know what it does, who generate this set of instructions for us, because after all, we don't do that anything for like that. It's the model bundler that actually do that, whether it's Vite, Parcel, Webpack, any model bundler. And then we look now at the server-side rendering. Whereas code splitting focuses loading necessary code, or load the bare minimum necessary code to make our initial page load time faster, the server-side rendering focuses to make the initial render faster as much as possible. Okay, well, with the trade-off of uh, increase the interactivity time. So because the way how now modern applications are built, okay, back in the old days we have is this round trip. Okay, so anytime you want to navigate to a particular website, let's say an e-commerce, and then you have to wait for the server to actually send you all the data, or in this case HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The browser detect that and then render and transform that into pixel on the screen thanks to the critical rendering path. So now with that, this is something that takes time. It's slow. And these companies, what they focus their attention is to say, hey, let's gonna make the time to response or the user experience much more faster. So they come up with this idea of let's gonna do this client-side rendering. It means that once you navigate to a particular website, things are gonna load them faster. Okay, so as you move on through your application. So for example, as you move on into the e-commerce, things are going to pop up as they come on. All right. So Facebook designed this, and this is something that you can have an analogy here. For example, like all video games, okay, where you don't know the entire landscape. You just only load things that are closer to this. Now in today's world, games like Fortnite and kind of thing, in GTA, you can see things at the end of the universe almost. Uh, this is one good analogy. Okay, in the case of this client-side rendering, and another analogy is like, because if you drive something, whether it's a bicycle, skateboard, vehicle, McLaren, Bugatti, Kawasaki, whatever, if you are in the driver seat, you're not able to see comes as they getting here, right? So this is pretty much a good analogy of the client side rendering from the user perspective. As you click in your e-commerce, you're going to see things appearing. So at the beginning you see the landing page, you see the search bar, you decide to hit something for your dog or your cat. Okay, let's say you want to buy some, you want to order is some nice little shirt for your pet, and you're gonna click that. You're gonna show you now the product, or all the product here. You're gonna select which one do you like to. You're gonna show you now the product detail, and as you can see, anytime that it shows you something, this is called the hydration phase of the application for the developer perspective. Okay, so we are now showing to your users things as they navigate to that. So the analogy here with the driving is that as you are in your bicycle, you're going to see things as they come on here, okay, and perhaps are in obstacles. So you now navigate through this kind of thing. Okay, now server-side rendering, the way how it works is by, you need from the developer perspective to have is the client code, where you're gonna load only the code, and when you're going to hydratate that, okay, as well as the server-side code, where you're gonna only load code when the server-side rendering happened. When that happened, you may wonder. So this client side is something, as I mentioned before. So as you are now in the app, and then you navigate through the app, we're gonna hydratate that client code. But for example, let's say you want is to you know what is the product, because you already searched that previously, and now you have the money to do that. So you're gonna get that. You copy that link and then you paste that. And when you paste that and hit enter from the user, it's now going to send that request to the server, which means that it's time for the server to do the rendering. In other words, to generate the HTML needed so the users can see the product detail or that particular resource. So that's what we have, client and server-side rendering. So this is something that is defined by React. So React is going to handle that. You use GSX to do that, okay? And then you let your model bundler or dev server to generate those assets for you, which is the JavaScript code. And then once that code is generated, you're going to get that file. In this particular case, the index generated by the client. You're going to split that in the because you want is to hydratate or to render, or to do this interpolation to render your content there, and then send that document to the client. And that's pretty much what we did here, okay? with this particular code. The client app, the server app, okay, we extract our entry point to be generally as much as possible. We generate those script here, those code here, as a way to now have the JavaScript code for ready for productions, and then we're going to now emit this data once the user requests that, using something called node stream, which is a data type that allows us to work with large amount of data per chunks. It's like, oh, cool, cool. So once we generate is our server and we instruct our server, again, this is something that frameworks like Next.js is actually doing behind the scenes, is help you with that kind of thing, okay? And yeah, this is something that Next.js is doing. So so once Next.js, which is something that Next.js is actually doing, okay? So once you tell your server to actually get that particular file, server-side file, and then we from React that contains all the necessary code that we're going to inject in the client index HTML, okay, that will be sent to the client. We can use something called string for that, okay. This is to send data as they're available to the client. So because, or if SEO is something important to you, well, string is something is slow for Google or for a search engine, right? So it means that, well, now that we have this, it is important to define that once everything is done, which is part of or this particular life cycle on already, and the SEO is it's important or it matters for you. Well, now let me is to yeah. So now let me actually generate all of the code from that. So actually the content will be served as it is, fully rendered to the browser, so now the web crawler can actually index that and properly rank that. Okay, so this is server-side rendering. Then we look something called like low priority re-rendering. So remember that this is Facebook problems. Facebook's sake, or Facebook have this concept of high priority rendering and low priority rendering. In our particular case, use defer and use transition. Okay, so the first is when you have to tell React, hey, I have something heavy to load, so be prepared for that, which is this. Use defer. It's like I have something heavier to load that, okay, or I have something heavier to do with. All right, perhaps you already fetch the data from the server and then you want us to re-render or putting that in a low priority. Remember, this is because for Facebook, 1 second of delay, of perceived user delay, costs millions. So if this is something that matters to your company, please send me a check here. All right, and if not, well, it's important to know what is this doing. And the other is use transition, because with this is telling you, hey, I'm going to do something heavier. Okay, we're gonna load something heavier, and I want you to do this. The subtle difference here is that use the for value is for something that you want to, for something heavier that you want to do about it, and the other is for something that you would like to, or for something heavier you're going to load to do about it. One of the things you talk about is before and after, okay? But you want to do something heavier here, and you want us to whatever when something wrong happen, uh, let React drop that rendering for that. Okay. Then we get in here to actually what we care about into this video, which is Typescript. So first things first, Typescript is, or the thing that we're gonna look at this is how you can migrate your JavaScript code or your JSX code to Typescript, TSX code. Okay. So we're not gonna see what Typescript is, how Typescript works. You can take a look at other video related to that. So the thing here with Typescript is that, at least for the developer perspective, is this is something helpful because it provides live coding documentation. Okay, so it provides live coding documentations about the intent that you have when you wrote that code. So the anatomy here is to install the compiler, generate is the initial configuration for that, and then look at how you can start to migrate your JavaScript code to Typescript code, or to GSX, from GSX to TSS. Okay, so that's exactly what we do, or what we did. Okay, and we start with a leaf React component, something that doesn't have any relationship, or doesn't have too many dependencies. That's a good starting point from that. We also look at how we can set our ESLinter, okay, to enhance the capability of ESLint. Something that there was something called TSLint that actually do this, but now they are merged that and put that in one stack. So that's great. We also look at some of the configuration of our ESLint that we let it know to use is the Typescript configuration, the Typescript parser, as well as allow us to use the Typescript recommendation when it comes to provide style to our code. Because remember that when we are going to set up our project, it is first important to have some series of steps to guarantee the correctness of our application, which means you have is the code formatter. Hey, how this paragraph will look like, which is prettier. You have is the ESLint, which say, hey, what will be the style of this particular code will look like, all right, and also help us to fix some common JavaScript problems. Then we have is unit testing, how this different paragraph works together. Okay, does it make sense? And then we have Typescript, which guarantees that, hey, if we compare that with English grammar or any language grammar, particularly English, is that, hey, if this is an article, yes. This is a noun, yes. If this is a verb, yes. So it will help us to guarantee the correctness of our code. All of these different things help us to do that. And Typescript is one of these tools that allows us to write is this production ready apps, right? Okay. So once we already configure the ESLint, that we can actually make use of the ESLint configurations. And now I think that after we did that, and Mercury is retrograde. So after Mercury is retrograde and Saturn is on Aquarius, so that's fine. And now we can use Typescript. I'm joking, of course. So there is a particular rule here, especially if you want to, and once you migrate your entire or a plugin, once you migrate your entire application to Typescript, and there's a way to guarantee that people still use Typescript. This is something that you would like to have. Again, this is very aggressive of doing that. So we're gonna look at typing an API response. All right, good. Okay.
The next one down here.
Okay.
We're gonna go do details. .tsx.
So typing API response.
The next one down here. Results.
Console, carousel. Makes sense. Typing pet component in error boundary.
We are gonna do pet.js.
Okay. Typing components with React queries.
Let's do breed list.
And then typing components with forms. Okay. And then log where we got to header. Okay. Typing with API response. Oh, by the way, I'm going to take note of that course, so you will
next one down here.
See what I'm
we're gonna go do details. .tsx.
But
so
what I'm gonna take is this thing.
The next one down here. We're gonna go do
Okay. So this is typing. Typing
details. .tsx. So as is
exactly. So I type in and an API response. The other is typing detail and context component. Typing context component. Okay. Typing carousel component. In this case, typing element or DOM element. Elements component. Okay. Typing I think
we are going to do pet.
Exactly. Typing class component in error boundary. So typing class component in error boundary. Okay. Typing now React capabilities. Typing component with React. Okay, here. Typing React query. Okay, typing components. Exactly. Typing components with React query, and then typing component with a form. Then you say typing components with a form. Okay. So all of these are subtitles of this course or this model. But no. Interesting. You got this, and you got this, you got this, then you got this. So okay. Oh, this is just my soundtrack that I've used here. Okay. All right. So typing an API response.
We are going to do pet.jsx now. Pretty short little
No.
We're going to go do details.tsx. So as is tradition, we go into details and we modify this to details.tsx. All right. Now we get a bunch of type errors. That's exactly what we want. Before we get too far into details, we're going to create a new file on the side here inside of the source directory, and we're just going to call it API responses responses types.ts. It's very common that you'll have like a project and you'll have like a grab bag of like types that you want to do, and you put them in a separate file so you can like import them into other files.
Okay. It is common to use a file where you hold a Typescript file, a types file, like a grab or like a bag. Yeah, it is common to use a type files in projects. Like a bag of types that you can grab it.
People have varying different methodologies of doing this. I like just having like one just for API responses, maybe one for, I don't know, other types of objects that I might have, maybe common types of objects. Some people like to have one type, one file. That seems aggressive to me, but you know what, you do you. Some people having like one just for API responses, maybe one for, I don't know. People have varying different methodologies of doing this. I like just having like one just for API responses, maybe one for, I don't know, other types of objects that I might have, maybe common types of objects. Some people like to have one type, one file. That seems aggressive to me, but you know what, you do you.
Exactly. So having a type file for API response, and then for common might be a good approach. Okay, it's not mandatory.
If you feel that that's the best thing to do, you should do that. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna export a type of animal. This is gonna be kind of like an enumerated type. So our animals, we only have dog, cat, bird, reptile, or rabbit. So if we identify something as an animal, it can only be literally only one of these strings, right? If we try and put horse in there, it's going to say like, nope, that's not an animal. I know that, you told me that already. Yeah.
What happens if the API returns something you didn't expect?
Your program is going to crash. So it does not help you with that. So when you tell it like this is an API response and it's of this shape, right? The types are going to help you enforce that shape continues to look like that, but you're not saved from the fact that an API could change that on you, right? If you want something like that, you have to use something like, TRPC or something like that, or some other, there are ways to generate types from API shapes, but I mean, that still can get messed up, right? So maybe a different way of saying this is that Typescript does not save you from that problem. You still have the normal problem of what if my API is broken? Yeah.
Exactly, because JavaScript help you for JavaScript problems, not network problems or API problems. Okay. So Typescript help you help 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 you with JavaScript problems, not API problems. So you can can use for that things like TCP, TCPR. I think it's TGRP because it's TypeScript at TRPC. Sorry, okay, my bad. Exactly. End-to-end type safe. Exactly. End-to-end type safe API made easy. Makes a lot of sense. What is a C object, bro? It's like, what the F is this C object? Sub NPM library. What the hell is even that? But what is this? What is the problem that is solved? TypeScript first schema validation with static type inference. Okay, validation. TypeScript first schema validation with static TypeScript schema validation. TypeScript schema validation. I'm using the term schema to broadly refer to any data type from a single string to a complex nested object. Sub is designed to be as developer friendly as possible. The goal is to eliminate duplicated type declaration. With sub, declare a validator 1 and so we automatically infer the static type. It is easy to compose simpler types into complex data structure. API libraries build end-to-end APIs without GraphQL. Alright. Form integration. React hook form, a first-party sub-resolver from okay. Sub to X. But this is to generate, but this is to type valid. Okay, TypeScript first schema declaration and validation library. Okay, schema validation, schema declaration and validation library. This is pretty much like an express validator. Okay. But in this case, it'll actually check the schema and it validates. So you define any schema or any shape of data here, and then it validates that. Makes sense to define this on the back end. Makes sense to define this in the back end. Yeah. TypeScript schema validation. Exactly. TypeScript first schema and validation library. So it allows you to define the shape of the data and then validate uh, that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Cat means cat in Swedish. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 Cool. 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 It's TRPC, bro. Okay.
Yeah, at was it LinkedIn? I don't remember. One of my companies, we actually generated types from API responses, and it ended up being more annoying than worth it, to be totally frank with you. Was it LinkedIn? I don't remember. One of my companies, we actually generated types from API responses, and it ended up being more annoying than worth it, to be totally frank with you. I would have preferred to just maintain the types by hand, because the types that it generated were nuts. All right, export interface. You still have the normal problem of what if my API is broken? Yeah. Yeah, at was it LinkedIn? I don't remember. One of my companies, we actually generated types from API responses, and it ended up being more annoying than worth it, to be totally frank with you. I would have preferred to just maintain the types by hand, because the types that it generated were nuts. All right.
The face. Oh my god, your face describes me.
Does not generate types from API shapes, but I mean that's you have to use something like what is it, TRPC or something like that, or some other. There are ways to generate types from API shapes, but I mean that still can get messed up, right? So maybe a different way of saying this is that Typescript does not save you from that problem. You still have the normal problem of what if my API is broken? Yeah. Yeah, at was it LinkedIn? I don't remember. One of my companies, we actually generated types from API responses, and it ended up being more annoying than worth it, to be totally frank with you. I would have preferred to just maintain the types by hand, because the types that it generated were nuts. All right, export interface pet, and we're just gonna type what our pet looks like. Number is an ID is a number, name is a string. For to just shapes, an API response, and it's literally only one of these strings. This is going to be kind of like an enumerated type.
Mm-hmm. So here, now let's go to the code. Jumping to the code. That's right. So here we're going to generate is a file per response, whether you like it or not, which is API detail response dot tx, and I think API response types. Okay. API response types. Okay, what we're going to generate is a enum or a cons of or a bag of cons by saying is export type animal. I'm supposed to say export type animal. Okay, and here we're gonna give is the cons or the values that it need to match.
It can only be
And it can only be one of this. Let's say dog or a cat, okay, or bird, reptile, rabbit. Okay, so bird, reptile, or rabbit. It can be only one of these values.
One of the
API.
this isn't on you. Apes, and animal, just pet API response. All right, worth it, to be totally frank with you. I would have preferred to just maintain the types by hand, because the types that it generated were nuts. All right, export interface pet, and we're just gonna type what our pet looks like. Number is an ID is a number, name is a string, animal is a animal. We just made that one. Description is a string. Breed is a string. Images is an array of string. City is a string. And state is a string. Cool, cool. Export interface of pet API response.
Because what we're using is
Some people like to
actions.
really get into it and say call this like iPet instead of, because it's like an interface, right? And it kind of like signifies too that like this is a tight, I think it's a .NET thing. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I worked at Microsoft at long enough to I should have written .NET and I never did. I don't do it because it looks ugly to me and usually it's not a problem. But I'll tell you that there are lots of people that do it that way. Number of results, number, start index, number, end index, number, has next is a Boolean, and pets is an array of pet objects. All right, so there you go. That is the types of at least our pet API search results. And now we have this pet API response shape in a couple places in our code, and we just can continue to use it, which is nice. All right, so back at details.tsx here, we are going to import our type here, import pet API response from API responses types. Okay. The top of the render function here, if we don't have an ID here, because in theory this ID can come back as undefined, right? Like what happens if we end up on the details page and they didn't give us the correct ID? Technically it's possible for that to happen. And you can see here this ID can be either string or undefined. We have an error boundary, so let's just lean into that, right? If you remember down here at the bottom, there's an error boundary. Let's just throw an error, right? So if there's no ID, then throw new error. Why did you not give me an ID? I wanted an ID. I have no ID. I write great error messages. Okay. This is a question, I suppose. Maybe a couple exclamation.
Okay. But the idea here is to say, hey, I want you to write is the necessary code, which is here, to say this is an enum type that it can only have one of these values, just like that. Export type. It say this parsing error cannot read project Typescript config. Okay, now this is, but this is Typescript. I think this is ESLint. On the browser here. Okay, doesn't matter. Chill. I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna paste this. Configuration here. Save that. And then we're gonna say, hey, you know what? Source here. Where here we're gonna have is our it's ESLint JSON. Okay, that'll have all of this. It's a project tsconfig JSON, my friend. Oh, I think why it is complaining about it. I think why this is complaining about it. Yeah. Okay. Set up ESLint with Typescript. Okay. I don't want to save anything here. Nothing on the desk. Get place. Get tools. Origin to repo. That's right. And this is complaint because it say, hey, we don't have the thing that you think you have. And you may wonder, why do you think it is? Exactly. It's because where I am located. Okay. It's because where I am located. That's what it says. It's like, hey, I cannot read this. I cannot read this file because I am in the wrong position. I cannot look at it. So let's go now to say, hey, open here this. And now it's gone. So no error here. And I think we went out of sync. Yeah, I think we went out of sync here quite a bit. Yeah, we went out of sync. Now we are here. Okay. We define our bag of constant here, or enum type, which it can only have one of its value. As we have this. And then I just want to take a look at is this particular interface for that, which is exactly what we care about for this case. Okay, so yep, so create a new file called API response type, which is something that is up to you how will be this. Okay, export type is just an enum type here, what we define here. And that's good. That's very good. And we will have is to change something here. To make use of it.
There we go. Okay.
So for example here. in our code will be is in the details. So detail here, this is what we like to do here. To be defensive with our code. Okay.
The next one down here, results. This one here. The next one down here, results. This one here. So here we're going to say with use query DSX. All right. Okay. This is a question, I suppose. The next one down here, results. This one here. So here we're going to say with use query, we're going to tell it what kind of query that it's going to get back to us. So this gives you back a pet API response. What's cool about this?
Let me see. It actually is something that we are complaining about this. Okay.
This is now we can look at results, and what is results going to be? It's going to be a use query result where inside of it we know that there's already a pet API response, which is cool. The next one down here, results. Look at results, and what is results going to be? It's going to be a use query result where inside of it we know that there's already a pet API response, which is cool. Okay, awesome. What are you mad about? The unknown must have a symbol iterator method that returns an iterator. Okay, okay. So we do have to change this from disable next line to Typescript -eslint -no unused var. That'll save us from one error. Vars, there we go. That's good. And underscore set pop adopted pet use context adopted pet context.
Okay, because we need to actually give is the shape of the context.
Unsafe assignment of any var. Well, let's keep going with that. I don't have a note to fix that. That's fine. Replace the pet declaration down here.
Which here it say, hey, it can be undefined. Exactly.
Object is possibly undefined. That's fine. So we can be a little bit more guarded about that if we use these accessor methods here, if we put question marks. So now pet can potentially be either pet or undefined, and then again, we can throw an error here if there is no pet. So if there's no pet, then throw new error, no pet, lol. Okay, there we go.
No pet, lol. And all of those errors will be captured. Exactly. All of those rendering errors will be captured by the error boundary, which is help us to be kind of defensive of, hey, if there is some rendering error, oh, now things will make sense.
Oh, is it up here? Is that what it's mad about? Is this use state? Oh, it's just mad that I haven't probably typed this adopted pet context. That's exactly what it's mad about. Okay.
Yeah.
We're fine. So it's still going to be mad about this because we're pulling stuff in from adopted pet context. This is going to end up being an any, and so it thinks this underscore here is an any, and our TypeScript, or not our TSLint, is actually mad. It's like, hey, you told me, you promised me, you told me that I cannot have any's, and I'm mad at you for giving me an any. So we're actually not going to be able to fix this file quite yet. We're going to have to go type our context first before we can come back and say this is error-free. So you should see one here, the set, right? Because this is going to be an any, and this is going to be an any, and we'll go fix that later, which is fine. We expect that. Last thing here, I told you down here that we'd have to fix this later. We're passing props through blindly. I still stand by that. I think this this is a good idea, and we could go type this so that it continues to happen, but the easier thing to do here is we have no props being passed down, right? We're not reading props at all in details. So this is effectively a no op here, so we can just delete it.
Because we already safeguarded that.
This is effectively this so that it continues to happen, but the easier thing to do here is we have no props being passed down, right? We're not reading props at all in details. So this is effectively a no op here, so we can just delete it.
Okay.
And that fixes that type. Okay, you're still gonna get a bunch of errors up here because it's like error boundary is not typed. Yes, I know that. You don't have to yell at me about that. I know that it's not typed, but we'll get there. This is exactly what a TypeScript migration is like. It's like, why is that an error, right? You just keep asking yourself over and over again, and you just figure it out kind of on the fly. It's just like
Why is
dance
this an
with the TypeScript compiler.
You dancing with the TypeScript compiler. Okay, why is this error? You dancing with the TypeScript compiler?
Having done this a few times, it's very much that. The more you do this, though, the less you fight with the compiler.
Wisdom. The more you do this, the less you fight with the compiler.
But I would say going from like 10% of your code base in TypeScript to like 60% of it in TypeScript is misery.
Oh, shit. No. Oh man. Oh. Okay. 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 This is now something. Okay. Okay. Gems here. Wisdom gems. A gem wisdom. Jesus. Gem wisdom. And this is what a migration, this is what a migration of TypeScript will look like. You ask, why TypeScript? Why is yelling me about this error? Oh shit. you ask, why is yelling me about this error? And then you go to dance for this.
You just figure it out kind of on the fly. It's just like dance with the TypeScript compiler.
You figuring out things on the fly, which is it's like dancing with the TypeScript compiler. It's like dancing with the TypeScript compiler. The other gem wisdom. Gem wisdom. Okay. Or wisdom gem. Yeah, wisdom gem here. Wisdom gem here. This is one. There's another wisdom gem here. Uh, going from going from 10% to 60%, going from 10 to 60% of TypeScript code is misery.
Tyler. Having done this a few times, it's very much that. The more you do this, though, the less you fight with the compiler.
Wisdom gem, wisdom gem. Oh my god. The more you do this, the less you fight with the compiler.
But I will say, going from like 10% of your code base in TypeScript to like 60% of it in TypeScript is misery. Because you're getting lots of type errors and you don't know why and you're not sure, is it actually an error or is it just TypeScript being finicky? But once you're like at like...
Exact. Because you don't know if that is a type error, is a type error, or TypeScript being finicky, or TypeScript being finicky. Like annoying. Finicky, man. Finicky. Finicky. Melindroso, peliagudo, mañoso. I really love that. Finicky.
80% TypeScript, and especially when you're at 100% TypeScript, it's just incredibly useful. Is it actually an error or is it just TypeScript being finicky? But once you're like at like 80% TypeScript, and especially when you're at 100% TypeScript, it's just incredibly useful.
But once you are 80%, yeah, but once you are at 80% of TypeScript, or 100%, it is very useful because of this live code documentation about the intent you have when you wrote that code.
But I'm just gonna tell you, getting there sucks. Like,
But I'm just gonna tell you that getting there sucks like
a lot. You're gonna like ask yourself like, what am I doing with my life that brought me to this point?
Oh my god. Oh, I can laugh, man. I laugh. Okay. Getting to that point sucks. You ask yourself, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life at this point? And I know what I'm doing. It's just helping there with their business. And I'm exchanging here is my time, my expertise, and my skill set for their systems, security, and their exposure. Period.
Right? Like I should go back to being a barista. That was so much easier. That was so much better. TypeScript broke me. Anyway,
I should go back to be a not only a barista. I should go back to be a barman. Yeah, it is so much easier. TypeScript broke me, or at least you, my friend.
let's go fix adopted pet context.js. So make this a .ts instead of a .js. We're gonna import pet.
Okay, so thing is where it becomes now interesting. On the detail is gonna complain about it, but the first we're gonna focus is only on the. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing right now. Yes, that's right. So, yes, step by step. Let me actually change this because it's not complaining about that because I haven't modified that to TSX and bam. Who the F are you? TypeScript compiler is doing its job. What is this? Who is this? And what is that? Okay, we already did this. It already telling us this error, which is say unsafe assignment of any. So I don't expect you. You tell me that we shouldn't have things like any here. So here we can use this the decorators or operators like. Here in this case, okay. Oh, it's telling us that results unsafe assignment to any value, which is hey, this is the rule, and just obey that. Which is something that it comes through this. Like hey, it can be any value. You promised me that it's not. And I say, okay, well, this is the API pet API response, which luckily for us is actually auto imported, which is great. Now we don't have any error here unless we say this will be optional. Okay. If this is not optional, then you're gonna throw a particular error for that.
To go back to being a, you're gonna yell at me about fixes that type.
Exactly. For example, yeah. So he would say, hey, exactly. So if bed doesn't exist, okay, then I would like you to throw an error, throw new error, and letting now the error boundary, this particular component that we wrap here on more details, it will capture that and well redirect that to our particular application. What is the error that we want to add that? What, you don't give me an ID? No, you're complaining about it. Exactly, this is no pet lol. It's like no pet lol. And if we move on here, we say that this is something that is exactly from the set adopted, which is part of the context. This is not what we want to do that right now. And it's now telling here, but because here we're not receiving any props for that, okay, then we're not going to send anything like this, right, as it is. So detail is not actually getting any trouble with that or any error for that. And again, if we want to make use error boundary in a particular component, we need to make a we need to do something like this. So we need to wrap our functional components in an error boundary, which is something that comes from our error boundary uh, project or that kind of things, like so. In this case, the error boundary. So okay, this is just for the detail page, or a particular page.
Any's, and I'm mad at you for giving me an any. Like I just dot slash API response types. We're gonna have to be a lot more specific with create context. So let's just go ahead and do that. We're gonna tell it that it has either a pet type, and then it's gonna be an adopted pet function that returns a pet. Sorry, an adopted pet which takes in as a parameter and it returns void.
Interesting. Okay, holy hell.
Then it's going to be an adopted API response types. We're going to have to be a lot more specific with create context. So let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to tell it that it has either a pet type, and then it's going to be an adopted pet function that returns a pet. Sorry, an adopted pet which takes in as a parameter and it returns void.
It takes in as a parameter, as adopted pet, and returns void. Okay.
Okay. And then you have to, like, it just gets mad. You have to give it a default value, or else it's going to be mad, because by default, this is going to be created without it. So let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to give it basically a fake looking hook. So we have to give it a pet and it has to satisfy the pet type. So just make up a pet right here with me. Name, Fido, animal. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? It's auto-completing this for us, right? Which I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that I love about TypeScript. It just knows that an animal, it has to be an animal type, and so therefore my VS Code is auto-completing stuff for me. Okay, I'm going to say that I need a description. It auto-completes that. Lorem ipsum. Breed. Beagle. Images, you can just give it an empty array. City, put whatever you want here. I just put Seattle. State, WA. And then give it here just an empty function. And that will satisfy the adopted pet context. So you might ask, like, what is
the adopted pet context?
What is this actually for? Like, why do I give it this like default value? If you create the context without a context provider above it, this is what's going to be stored in it, which you should never do, right? You would never do like default value. If you create the context without a context provider above it, this is what's going to be stored in it, which you should never do, right? You would never do that. Where this actually can be useful is you can actually now write tests for this adopted pet context, and you don't have to wrap it in some provider, right? That would be the very limited use case where it's actually useful that we do provide it here, some sort of default value. The other thing you could have done here is you could have just said or null, because you can store like null in here maybe if you wanted to. And then here, what we could have done is instead of this, we could have just given it null, and that would have satisfied it as well. It's totally up to you how you choose to handle that. I like taking that null out of here because now it really can't be null, and then I don't have to check everywhere if it's null. It's up to you how you choose to handle that. I like taking that null out of here because now it really can't be null, and then I don't have to check everywhere if it's null or not. So I'm going to leave that up to you how you choose to do. Instead of this, we could have just given it null, and that would have satisfied it as well. It's totally up to you how you choose to handle that. I like taking that null out of here because now it really can't be null, and then I don't have to check everywhere if it's null or not.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave that up to you.
Okay. This segment. Okay. And now this is on the context here. Okay, on the context. Context component. Context component. So we have to satisfy things like that. So we need to provide a shape and a default value to the context. The reason to do this is for testing. Okay, exactly. So the reason to do this is for testing.
Put whatever you want here. I just put Seattle, specify the adopted pet context. So you might ask, like, what is this actually for? Like, why do I give it this like default value? If you create the context without a context provider above it, this is what's going to be stored in it, which you should never do, right? I give it this like default value. If you create the context without a context provider above it, this is what's going to be stored in it, which you should never do, right? You would never do that. Where this actually can be context without the adopted pet context. So you might ask, like, what is this actually for? Like, why do I give it this like default value? If you create the context without a context provider
If you create the context without the context provider
above it, this is what's going to be stored in it.
Exactly, this is what's going to be stored there. And again, this
which you should never do, right? You would never do that. Where this actually can be useful is you can actually now write tests for this adopted pet context, and you don't have to wrap it in some provider, right? That would be the very limited use case where it's actually useful that we do provide it here. Some sort of default value. The other thing you could have done here is you could have just said or null, because you can default value fit in some provider, right? Where this actually can be useful is you can actually now write tests for this adopted pet context, and you don't have to wrap it in some provider, right? That would be the very limited use case where it's actually useful that we do provide it here, some sort of default value.
Okay. So the reason to do this is for testing, which is a very limited use case.
The other thing you could have done here is you could have just said or null. Null, it really can't be null, and then I don't have to check everywhere if it's null or not. So I'm going to leave that up to you on how you choose to do that. Okay.
So for example, if I take a look now at the code for the business, nope, not this code, it's this one. And then I want to take a look at any context here. What sort of context do you define there? Simple context. There must be a context. You get context. That's right. Exactly. Makes sense. Very important is that from the shape of this, exactly. Circle 9, driver mobile measurement. Well, let's React here. Create context dispatch action. Utils analytics. Set trip events. And the default ticket here, which is the default object here, exactly. This is a bag of constant, okay. And then you have export interface, custom input group, payload. As well as the interface, the type, which is again another unique value that it can be. Okay, it can be a ticket, it can be a trip event, trip event this, all of this already can be defined. Export type is another bag of constant or a type here, or an enum. When you say, hey, this thing called dispatch, which must come from exactly from a reducer, or from React, by the way. This dispatch function must be a type of action and a ticket. Okay. Which is kind of using is this use reducer here. It is an action, okay, that have the action type ticket, or it can be this one. Ticket action type, the ticket action payload type. Export type here. Exactly, exporting is another type here, and then the interface here. Export const ticket reducer completely, and here's what they're defining is their reducer here using React version 18, which is something great, by the way. It's lovely, bro. Right now you're not see what I'm doing because this is part of the company that I work with, but the thing here is that it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense why they doing is that. And in this case, where is the context? Create context here. They define this. Okay. And they pass as a default ticket state completely. That makes a lot of sense, which is this object that they generate here, and then they dispatch for that. So especially the thing that I'm looking right now is useful. The reason to do it is for testing, which is a very limited use case, but something that you will see in large code bases. Something that you will see, or something that you will watch, something that you will see in large code bases. Oh my god, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, okay, so this is where the TypeScript -1 milestone was. It wasn't the last one, now it is.
So now let's go back to our context here, which is here in the adopted context. And here, we're going to transform this into a TX file. When we say this is a TX file, you're going to complain about it, and this is when we have to be very specific about this. When you say, hey, you're gonna receive is a genetic here, a genetic type. So when you take a look at this, you say, hey, this is that. Where we expect that to be is the genetic type here, as well as a default value. If you thought this should be optional, see this. Definitely type things like this. But this is now come from there. So this default value must be the shape, with the shape of this, where in our case is the pet. Okay, the pet. If I write, that should be is the shape of that. Exactly. It must be with the shape of this, the pet. And we need to pass now is a default value as a parameter here. We need to pass is a default value here as a parameter here. But here's where you need to be more explicit about this, because on the create context, this is when you say, hey, this will be an array of pet and a function that should return, that will accept the adopted pet.
So if you
Adopted pet, which is the shape of this pet, and this will return is null. This is this context, which will create is some sort of hook, all right, where you're gonna have is the pet and the function that will receive as an input the pet here. So if you take a look now of our code here, which is this, which is the state, the ticket state, and the dispatch here, this is a little bit more descriptive here when you say state and the dispatch here, okay, when you say create context. So the ticket state, let's say this is the state I'm going to receive, and the ticket dispatch, this is the thing that I can do with this. Makes out quite sense here, but in our case we specify that that is a function here. It doesn't return anything. What we need to specify is the shape of this. Useful for testing, and you're gonna see that in LAR code bases. In the case of this, so for our case, because we define this as it is, okay, now we need to define is the shape of this object. In this case is exactly, which is the shape of this object first, okay, and here's when you pass is the default value for it, all right, some sort of default value you expect it to pass through, and then is this particular function with adopted pet, which is the shape of that. But we can pass that to be optional, which to me is interesting, exactly. Which can be a pet or a null, exactly, which can be pet or null. And here in the adopted pet, it can be this function here or null, where you can receive exactly when you say this or null here, and now Typescript will not complain about it.
If you want to catch up here, you can just copy and paste TypeScript -1. or not copy and paste, but just take the whole folder.
That's
So now if we go back to
that's
details, you can
quite
see it should be
interesting, by
less
the
mad
way.
about this, right? Because now this is actually typed. Oh, you might have missed that because I did it kind of fast. Sometimes VS Code tries to be pretty judicious about when it reruns your TypeScript for you because it doesn't want to run it constantly on you. So you can see there that I had an error that I knew I had fixed. So just a really quick tool to fix that, I'll just like cut the line and then hit Control Z, and that forces TypeScript to run again. So if I just hit Command X, or I'm pretty sure Control X on Windows, it'll cut the entire line, and then I'll just hit Control Z to put it back. That'll force TypeScript to rerun. I do it all the time. You'll probably see me do it a bunch of times in the middle of this.
So, if I now go to our code here where we are using this, like so. So by doing this, you are forcing this React to do that. I think we need to export the default. Yeah. We say type unknown must have a symbol iterator set adopted pet method that returns an iterator. He doesn't know about that. And the adopted pet. And I think, okay, let me see what you're complaining. Symbol iterator here. Okay, assignment never used. Okay, so we need to pass is the Typescript thing here. Say Typescript. Okay, I don't want you to complain about it. Typescript previously no use value here. Say Typescript. For Typescript previously no use bar. So now I'm talking Typescript ESLint no use bar, no unuse bar. Please don't complain about that. Okay. But it tells me now that this use context here called about the pet. Okay, is has an implicit type. Oh, but because we needed to actually say Typescript.
It's like one of that'll. I just hit Command X tool to fix. Oh. So now if we go back to details, you can see. So now if we go back to details, you can see it should be less mad about this, right? Because now this is actually typed.
So now this is already typed. What you say is this. And here is something interesting because it tells me that a node must have a symbol iterator. Perhaps it's because I didn't define that properly. So it will return is this thing, or is this iterator completely? Type unknown must have a symbol iterator. So are not exporting this adopted context here? We're actually exporting it as expected, which is an iterator here. But it say, hey, type unknown must have a symbol that iterator method that returns an iterator.
Do it all and compile. So you're like, if I run it again, here we go. We're going to do it in inner the carousel.j works.
Okay, here's where the pain comes from. I am quite familiar with this. But it's telling me here that, hey, this must be a pet, which it can also be new, but a function as it is. Okay. So once we are doing is this, and now in fact we're actually API response type. Okay. And for some reason here, if I close this and reopen this detail, you still complaining about that? You suck a bitch. It's like this doesn't actually recognize sometimes. You need to force them to do this. Son of a bitch. Okay. You need to force them sometimes. Yeah. Holy moly. You need to force. Okay. Quick note. You need to force the Typescript compiler in VS Code to run by adding the file and type proper in line code again. Jesus freaking Christ. Okay.
So, positive reinforcement. I'm going to keep doing it. Okay, here we go. Carousel. We're going to go back to carousel.jsx. Please make this carousel.tsx. Okay, we're going to do it in interface up here. Interface. You can call this props. You can call this iProps. In my notes here, I have it iProps because for what I've been writing TypeScript and React long enough that I've always called this iProps. I just told you that I don't do that in the other file, but these ones, for whatever reason, I always call them iProps. I think that's just force of habits. It's going to take in images, which is going to be a string array, right? And then here inside of component, you're just going to provide this as iProps. And so now it knows that wherever I refer to images, these are an array of strings, right? So that's where this gets passed into the React component, and you're now typing the type of props. You can give this as well like an iState, but we don't need to because we already set the default state here. So it already knows that this.state is a object that has an active, which is a number. Because it's also reading off the fact that we have a number here by default, so therefore it assumes that all state is active.
Exactly, we inherit that.
So this isn't necessary. We used to have to do this, right? We used to have to give it the type of state, but with what are they called? Class properties, which is doing this. We don't have to do that anymore. You might ask me, well, why can't we do it here with default props? It's because it's static and not necessarily going to show up in the props, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, this doesn't work, but this does. We used to have to type anymore. You might ask me, well, why can't we do it here with default props? It's because it's static and not necessarily going to show up in the props, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, this doesn't work, but this does. We used to have to type state all the time, but we don't have to do that anymore. Now we just have to do props with regards to components, class components. Yeah. All the time, but we don't have to do that anymore. Now we just have to do props with regards to components, class components. Yeah. Great. So we did that. We told it that we expect props that are going to be of shape images. We got that there, array of images. That's all good. The one thing it's going to say, like, hey, you're asking for an event here. You need to tell me what type of event this is. So we're going to say that this is a mouse event, which we want that to come from React. So this mouse event. Technically, it's the same shape as like a DOM mouse event. So I think you could probably literally put the DOM mouse event. They are different, right? So I try and make sure that it comes from React. Right?
Exactly.
So we're importing the mouse event
Because
from
you
React.
have to,
And we need to tell it what it was pointing at. And it was pointing at an HTML element. Okay. Still not quite there. We still have to say, because this event, it can still be null, right? So we have to say, well, yeah. Let me see. Okay, so we might not have to even do that. So what we do have to say is like, hey, what happens if that HTML element does not have a data set on it? So we can just say if event.target.dataset.index. So we can ask the question, does it have that? If it does, then use that. I guess we do still have to ask that. Okay. So if no event.target instance of HTML element, then just return and do nothing. Oh, okay, so that was enough for it to satisfy it. We have to ask, is event.target an instance of HTML element? So therefore, at this point, we can be sufficiently satisfied that event.target definitely is an HTML element. Every HTML element definitely has the dataset object on it. It might not have anything on it. So here we have to ask the question, does it have an index? It does have an index, great. Now we can set that to active. And here with the unary plus, we are coercing it.
With coercing is the hyperstring number.
This is, again, common dancing with the TypeScript compiler. It's like, all right, how can I sufficiently satisfy you that I promise you that there's really gonna be a number there? I promise, right? So that's what we were doing there. I mean, you should ask yourself, do I think my code's better now? It's certainly more safe, but it was safe before, right? What I will say is, right now the API is always giving us well-formed data. I think you can imagine a future where it doesn't always give you well-formed data. This is going to make you resilient even to things like that, which is, positive. This is something to keep in mind. You might be looking at it as like, this is so much more code to do exactly the same thing, but it's forcing you to be more defensive about your code, which is going to make your code more resilient. Cool. So now we have reached TypeScript-2, if you want to go grab that from the repo.
So the idea here is, this is pretty much like the dance that we have with our TypeScript code, which is enforcing us to be defensive about that. In here we are adding is, this is the details, as well as, so add a context type. Now it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Especially when you're doing is the HTML, bro. It makes a lot of sense. The context type here. This is the kind of events you will have with TypeScript about to be defensive of the shape of the data, and this is something that you mentioned here, especially there on the class component. Being defensive of the shape of the data here. Yeah, this is pretty much not that dramatic change in terms of this. In terms of this, and then you go here and say, hey, you know what? The carousel here, I'm going to transform it in this into a TSX. When it say, hey, there's a lot of things going on. Here we're going to define is the interface of, this is not the shape, we're going to define is the of the props, if we're receiving any props here, which is image, that's right. Okay, which is our image here. Where these components here, it'll be with the shape. Okay, where this component, which can be this, it can receive the props and the state and that kind of thing. But here we're going to receive is the props here. We can say eProps because this is the way eProps, because this is the way how in Microsoft they did this kind of thing according to Ryan Hall. eProps here, which is now the image here. And as you can see, unlike context, we don't need to define is their default value because it is by default assuming this kind of thing, blah 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 blah. We don't need to define is the state because this is something that is also inherited that from here, and a state is a number, which is say, hey, yeah, this is the state that we have in this class component, and a lot of components are moving on to functional. And here we gotta do this event here, which is, hey, this is a mouse event that will be target is an HTML element. And here's when we need to be kind of defensive of this, because unsafe member access dot target of any value, unsafe member access dot target here. So here we need to be defensive about this by saying, hey, if the event does not exist, event.target does not exist, then return nothing. Okay. So we can say is, hey, if the event doesn't exist, so don't return nothing. And now if the event.target exists at this point, okay, we duplicate that. I don't want to do that. In fact, I just want us to move that. Okay, no, this is duplication. No, I want this to move up. Okay, no. Okay, what? Okay, fuck. How can I move this? No. Okay. My question is that how can I move this one? No. What is the key combo? What the fuck? No. Where's the key combo from? To move this. Wow. Why is this so hard? I'm copying it? Oh my god. How do you move this? That's pretty wild, bro. It's like, okay, let me have ChatGPT here open up. How can I move how can I move text selected? Yeah, how can I move selected text in VS Code from Mac keyboard? You're not gonna tell me? Cut copy paste on the reader. No. How can I move selected text? Can I move a selected text in VS Code from Max keyboard? Could the select move to a new location? Okay. My question. Okay. How can I move selected text in VS Code in Mac from keyboard? Oh, for real? I don't believe it. I don't believe you. VS Code. VS Code key map. VS Code Mac shortcuts. Basic editing, multi-cursor selection, editor manager, display, debugging. Thing is here. Basic editing. The fuck is this? Basic editing. Move editor, move line down, remove line comment, what are you? Move line down, up. But this is option. The thing is this. What is this sign, bro? This is control. Okay. And this is option. Okay. Okay, it's all okay. It's mean this all up? No, okay. Give me a second. And we're back. Okay. And yep, we're back. For some reason, this actually doesn't work. Oh, it is. Okay, finally, we're there. Good. So it's still having this issue. Okay. Event any. Is this mouse event is not generic? Ah, because we must tell that this must come from here. Okay, and now it makes more sense because remember, okay, from DOM operations, React has their own interface, synthetic event. That's it called. So you say, oh, this is interesting. If the event is here in event.target. If event.target.dataset, but in this case we have to make sure that if this is event.target exists, if it doesn't exist, return that. And then you say, hey target dataset. Okay, because this must come from mouse event here as well as the HTML element. Is this an HTML element that we're getting here? Oh, okay. So what we need to tell is something like this. If the event.target is not an instance, it's not an instance of the HTML element, no, element, oh, because we have to evaluate this entire expression here. Which is interesting. We have to actually verify that it is what it is, especially when you are doing this DOM event handling or DOM event manipulations. Okay, you have to be explicit about that. And then now data set, exactly, if data set dot index it say, hey, this is possibly undefined, but that to me is quite interesting because it say, hey, this can be quite possibly undefined. But if this actually exists, there's no need to actually worry about that. Because in fact it's this. So the thing here, especially when you're doing DOM manipulations, is that you have to be explicit about this by doing all of this type checking, and then you're going to do that. Code is quite verbose, yes, but it helps you to capture those errors at runtime, as well as to define is the intent of what this code is doing. Okay. 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 It's okay.
Yeah, and we're about, I don't know, 40%, 30% through our migration, but it starts going faster, which is cool. Cool. So now we have reached TypeScript-2, if you want to go grab that from the repo. Yeah, and we're about, I don't know, 40%, 30% through our migration, but it starts going faster, which is cool as well.
Yeah.
We are going to do pet.jsx now. Pretty short little component here. You can see it's very upset at the moment. Changes.
Okay. I think we can leave that as it is so far, which to me is like interesting. By doing this code or this pair programming with Brian Hall, you can learn a lot. I have learned a lot of how you do this kind of thing, and you can remember what you do, and as well as the intent of that. Okay. Typing or down typing. Exactly. So that'll be all for this video, and yeah, take care. Bye bye.